Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Well, it's sad to say, but I am back again with yet another Game of Thrones video. This one being about the prestigious Daenerys Targaryen, the Mad Queen herself. Down the rabbit hole we go. For those of you who don't know who this lady is, allow me to quickly explain her story to you. I will do my best to cover all important events from earlier seasons. Daenerys Targaryen is the daughter of Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King who attempted to destroy King's Landing and Dragonfire in order to preserve the Targaryen rule. When first introduced in the show, we see that her and her older brother Viserys have taken refuge in a foreign land as a result of their father's reign coming to an end. Daenerys is the youngest daughter of the most hated man in Westeros, and one of his two surviving offspring. She is at the mercy of her older brother and follows his instruction as she sees him as the leader of their family. Viserys is shown to have a very abusive and manipulative relationship with Daenerys. When she is sold into slavery by Viserys in an attempt to gain the Dothraki army, she encounters Khal Drogo and becomes his wife/concubine. At her wedding, she is gifted 3 dormant dragon eggs that she becomes particularly fascinated with. From this point, we see her develop a more nuanced view of the world of Westeros and her place in it. She oddly develops feelings for Khal Drogo in the process of learning how to please him sexually, and she even eventually becomes pregnant by him and embraces him as her husband and begins planning world domination alongside her new warlord slave master husband. Yet, her plans are brought to an abrupt halt when her buffoon husband decides to square up with one of his own men. Excuse me, I am being quite ignorant of Dothraki culture, but I just don't give a Yeah, Drogo sustains a fatal injury during said confrontation. Daenerys literally loses her shit trying to save him. Oh wait, did I mention she greenlights Viserys? Anyway, she enlists a witch that recently has been enslaved by the cow, Mary Masdur, and insists that she save Drogo from death. Mary agrees to help, but warns Daenerys that there will be blood magic involved and only death can pay for life. Daenerys is also pretty pregnant with the cow's baby by this point, which is important. Long story short, Mary Masdur pulls the good old switcheroo on Daenerys and swaps her unborn child's life in place of Drogo's. Or at least that is a solid interpretation of what occurred in this tent. Some say Drogo's horse that was brought in during the sacrifice was also involved in the exchange of life. Nonetheless, Daenerys loses Khal Drogo along with her unborn child. And one of the most iconic scenes in television history, she gets her lick back 10 times over by performing a ritual of her own, this time with Mary Masdur's life being the one up for exchange. Daenerys sets flame to a pyre with Drogo's body, Mary Masdur's, the dragon eggs, and her own body engulfed in the fire. In the end, she emerges unburnt with 3 dragons at her side. F***ing insane, I know. Daenerys is literally the reason most people have heard of Game of Thrones. She is undoubtedly the heart of the show. Following these events, we see her embark on a journey of leadership, resilience, patience, and liberation. Daenerys is a liberator, as we are shown in Meereen, as we are shown with the Unsullied, and even as we are shown with the dragons. Sorta. Daenerys is far from a perfect leader and definitely shows signs of rage that are similar to most rulers in Westeros. It's just that she happens to have 3 dragons at her disposal, which is a high amount of firepower even for a Targaryen. However, we've only seen her turn her dragons loose on those who have deserved it. Sorta. Throughout seasons 1 through 6, we see her acquire the strongest army in Westeros, be advised by some of the most battle-hardened veterans, and acquire a massive fleet. All things she set out to do in season 1. She does this while never enslaving a single soul, maybe excluding Missandei, but that doesn't count because they became besties. She also does this while never murdering the innocent, never sacking a city, intentionally choosing not to use her massive dragons as a tool of war. Granted, she crucified and incinerated a bunch of slave masters along the way, but it was all within reason. However, season 7 and 8 take all of the hard work that this character has put in to actively fight the stigmas placed on her and her family and shit all over it. It's clear that Daenerys' descent into madness was rushed in order to fulfill a deadline, not in order to properly fit into the story and feel like an earned event. In fact, it is actually some of the most depressing shit you can watch on TV. Where do we even start with this? How about her losing Viserion to the fucking Night King? Nice going, Daenerys. You literally had one job. Anyways, Daenerys is forcefully pulled into the conflict in the north after meeting Jon Snow, aka Aegon Targaryen, aka the King in the North, who comes to her refusing to bend the knee or acknowledge her family as the rulers of Westeros. Daenerys decides to act like a fucking child in this moment and essentially demands Jon's immediate forgiveness of her family's generational crimes and his undying loyalty. Jon obviously refuses her despite her trying to falsely imprison him as a traitor. This is despite Jon providing her with valid reasoning as to why he is not quick to trust anyone, especially now that he is the king of the north. He is no longer just operating on what he solely thinks is best. He must now think for an entire country's worth of nationalistic motherfuckers. After falsely imprisoning him for all of 15 minutes, she decides to talk to Tyrion, her dumbest advisor, about the situation, and he convinces her to give Jon Snow what he wants, which at the moment is to mine dragon glass that is hidden under Dragonstone, as he recently discovered that the White Walkers are vulnerable to said material. Daenerys sees this as an inconsequential favor that would only elevate her position in the north in the long run. Jon even asked her if she truly believes him about what he has seen beyond the wall, and she doesn't really answer. She just insists that he get to work, which indicates to us as the viewers that she doesn't really know what the fuck she's getting herself into. And she doesn't. But anyway, from this point, she slowly falls in love with Jon Snow. Excuse me, she actually rushes full steam ahead into a relationship with Jon Snow, who hasn't really done anything in particular to garner this type of affection from her. Jon Snow is not half as witty, charming, or flirty as he was with Ygritte, maybe considering the fact that he's literally been killed and brought back to life. He is a shell of his former self, and is also undergoing a major identity crisis that cripples him to the point where even upon meeting the Dragon Queen herself, he can only awkwardly stand there like he's about to shit his pants, while Sir Davos does all the politicking. Jon Snow is literally the first dude from Westeros that Daenerys meets while in Westeros, and she instantly tries to fall in love with him. For a woman who lost her first love, has been betrayed by so many men, and literally just exited a relationship a week ago, she sure does move on quick. But anyway, I'm describing these events so that you can understand how she ends up here, because she realistically has no business being a part of a horrible scene like this, but it did happen. So basically, the climax of season 7 is built on the single-handed dumbest idea anyone in Westeros has ever come up with. After receiving a raven from Winterfell, Jon gets news that the Night King and his army have been spotted approaching Eastwatch by the Sea. Jon immediately makes plans to depart from Dragonstone and go confront the Night King. He inquires about Daenerys joining him, but she brings up the valid point that if she leaves to help him fight, Cersei will take complete control while she's away. So Tyrion, her dumbest fucking advisor, decides to pitch the brilliant idea of bringing a white to Cersei, in hopes of convincing her to call off the war until the threat is dealt with. And as if this plan was not unhinged enough, Jon and Ser Jorah completely rip the door off the hinges when they suggest that this mission could or should be manned by only a few men. Absolutely insane, especially considering Jon's experience with the White Walkers prior to this episode and him almost losing his life. Does he not remember the massive numbers that they travel in, how skilled and tactical they are, how impossible this mission truly was? I guess not. No one in this room even hints at the fact that this is a terribly pointless idea, maybe excluding Varys, who mentions that Cersei may just murder all of them despite proving there is a threat. Jon, Tormund, the Hound, Beric, Thoros, and Gendry take this ridiculously stupid suicide mission beyond the wall to capture one white and somehow transfer it to King's Landing. I'm sorry, but how do these dickheads even know that the white will still be alive once taken so far away from its power source? Or do they know the appropriate temperatures to store a white in? Are they not magical beings? Does that magic not need to be directly sourced from a White Walker? Anyway, they end up ironically capturing a white on their first attempt, but also predictably attract the rest of the Night King's army as well. They apparently didn't anticipate this fucking thing screeching at the top of its lungs. I guess it was supposed to just quietly surrender and be a hostage. The crew of idiots ends up stuck on a rock for what seems to be a full day, having sent Gendry back to Castle Black to alert Daenerys as to what's going on. Part of me wishes this bastard never made it to his destination, because then Daenerys would have never showed up to save any of these douchebags. And as much as I like some of them, I value dragon life more. Gendry somehow runs 30 miles in a blizzard with layers of clothing on and still makes it in time to get word to Daenerys, who goes against the counsel of Tyrion and flies all three of her dragons to engage the Night King and rescue Jon. Her first and biggest mistake was bringing all three dragons. Not only did this make zero sense from a strategic standpoint because she's leaving her home base dragonless, she is not able to control the movements of all three dragons, so ultimately two are not very safe. Well, it turned out none of them ended up being safe in the end anyway. Daenerys shows up ironically at the moment these sons of bitches are about to die and saves them, and proceeds to go apeshit on the Night King's army. For a moment here, things look hopeful, even though I question how she's going to manage to land anywhere useful after obviously torching most of the ice. But obviously the show allowed her to land perfectly near her companions, who then begin to board Drogon like smart people, all except Jon, who continues to swing at zombies like he's trying to break his personal record on a fucking arcade game. This ridiculous rampage Jon goes on allows the Night King to grab a large toothpick and toss it at Viserion, not Drogon, who was right in front of him and being ridden by all of his enemies, but Viserion, the target furthest away from him. And we never get a reason for this. To be honest, I don't even feel like evaluating why he may have done this. Let's just assume blue is his favorite color. But yeah, Daenerys loses her first dragon, and this moment fucking sucks. Even though it is so predictable and you see it coming from a mile away, it is still pretty heart-wrenching to watch, especially as Daenerys' face can only be described as that of loss, grief, and helplessness. I'm conflicted on this because while I understand sooner or later one of the dragons did have to go, as Daenerys was pretty much invincible with all three of them at her side, I just find the way it was executed to be a bit rushed and impractical. The same guy who takes out Viserion with ease is somehow murdered by a child with a knife. But I digress. Daenerys losing Viserion in this way leaves us feeling so empty inside, and as if we aren't already crushed enough in spirit, he then becomes a fucking white dragon. How the fuck does the Night King get his whites that allegedly cannot enter water to retrieve Viserion from the bottom of this fucking frozen lake? How in the world does he then manage to get them to attach chains to said dragon and pull him back up to the surface, all without seemingly ever lifting a finger himself? Absolute bullshit. But I must say, the scene of Viserion destroying the wall is fucking sick. I guess since we're on the topic of the Night King, we may as well talk about the other things that he's taken from Daenerys. Like, I don't know, half of her fucking army, or what would look to be most of it, but I guess the Battle of Winterfell is so dark and poorly lit that your eyes are legit playing tricks on you. Because what I believe I witnessed in that scene was the extermination of the Dothraki army. And if that's not what I witnessed here, then why the fuck did only 20 to 40 of the Dothraki return from the initial charge? Where did the rest of them go? It is said that Daenerys had 60,000 Dothraki horse riders by the time she arrives at Winterfell, and the writers had literally stated that this was the end of the Dothraki. Now, do we take this literally? No. It clearly means that the Dothraki are no longer the prominent force that they once were in the show. But are we truly shown that? Other than this moment of watching them getting in battle, do we get any real consequences to them being removed from her army? Did they not make up the majority of her army? Why the fuck did she allow her most trained warriors to charge headfirst into an enemy they've never encountered and can't even see, providing them with no dragon fire despite knowing that the enemy is powerful enough to down a dragon? Why would your army be able to truly do anything other than protect the castle? Why are they chasing down an enemy that has them largely outnumbered and has giant polar bears, a dragon, and Lord knows what the else at its disposal? I guess she saw an open battlefield and figured that the Night King wouldn't dare send his undead army to meet them in battle. Her mistake. The show does a great job of showing the mass numbers each army has, but the amount of death and destruction we are seeing does not match the numbers that are still remaining when the battle concludes. I mean, even if you examine the scene where Grey Worm decides to sacrifice nearly all the Unsullied that hadn't crossed the trench, they zoom in on his face as if we were supposed to pick up on the fact that this is a really hard decision for him to make, because he is essentially sacrificing his army to ensure that Winterfell remains safe. This would render most of Daenerys' army to Northmen who are not truly loyal to her but Jon, and the dragons will become her crutch. But he makes the call anyway because of the impending wave of zombies approaching Winterfell, and this is fine until we see scenes revealing she still has what looks to be a prominent army. I mean, is there any greater way to render the Night King useless and inconsequential to the overarching plot of the story? Have him fucking destroy Daenerys' army right in front of us and then respawn them after an episode or two. This and this do not add up. Somebody ain't doing the math right. If this show was not going to commit to fully exterminating the Dothraki, why not show us them at least fighting back a little? They literally got mopped instantly. How are we to assume that any of them were able to make it back, especially on foot when they traveled that distance on horseback, and the army of the dead literally followed them back anyway? So how are most of them not a part of the Night King's army now? Same with the Unsullied, who faced the literal tsunami of zombies that first approached Winterfell. Does this look like a they had a fighting chance scene to you? All of these men are fucking dead. You think the show kept them alive to make them at least somewhat useful in the battle to come, but no. Daenerys fucking one-shots King's Landing with Drogon. She doesn't need any of these men here anyway. So I ask why? Why put us through all of this? Why not let her visually maintain most of her army to make it make sense? Just one aspect of this battle being rushed and not really making sense with a closer look. This ultimately renders Daenerys useless in the fight against the Night King, as she loses her army and the dragons don't play a part in his defeat. Daenerys and her forces are rendered to pawns in this battle. She tries to destroy the Night King and he laughs in her face, then almost kills Drogon again. Not to mention she gets tossed off Drogon at one point in the battle, and Ser Jorah legit fights off 700 whites for her. The same Ser Jorah who was of old age, just recovered from grayscale, and just narrowly escaped the army of the dead with his life. Yeah, honestly, fuck off. Before we get to the massacre of King's Landing, there are some ridiculous things that happen first. Like Daenerys loses fucking Rhaegal. This scene makes me so upset for so many reasons. Let's begin. Why the fuck are the dragons so easily hittable, and why is their skin so penetrable? From frozen toothpicks to wooden spears, these guys cannot take a hit. I guess I can't be too upset at the fact that they're vulnerable, but the scorpions just feel like such a cheap way to deal with a dragon. I prefer dragon on dragon crime, or even dragon homicide, but this right here is absolute horseshit. Showing us Rhaegal getting hit once, maybe. Twice is wild. Thrice is fucking insane. Consecutive hits on a moving target without even showing us any of the shots and how they actually managed to land them. You know what, they in fact could not show us this without putting their foot up their own ass in terms of making the scene make sense. How did Daenerys not see this fleet incoming? If they can see her, should she not be able to see them? Do the dragons not see them either? Did Cersei manage to hire fucking Hawkeye to man one of her scorpions? Because this shot makes zero fucking sense. Why not hit Daenerys if you have a clear view of both dragons? This would end the war and secure Euron's spot as Cersei's permanent bitch. But no, let's shoot down Rhaegal and then all miss when the actual target is charging straight towards us. How the fuck does Daenerys kinda forget that she is actively engaged in a war with a kingdom whose fleet has already fucked her over once before? How the fuck does neither Varys nor Tyrion nor Grey Worm remember that the Iron Fleet is a thing when that's their literal jobs? How the fuck does Tyrion survive this? Why is Euron shooting Daenerys' fleet with scorpions? What am I watching right now? How does Euron somehow capture Missandei in the midst of all this chaos? How does she manage to get all the way over here without knowing how to swim? If everyone was able to swim ashore, what stopped Missandei from doing so as well? Why does Daenerys have to lose Rhaegal after he just survived the Battle of Winterfell, where he faced a white dragon head-on, which would have been the perfect opportunity to kill him in exchange for Viserion's life or something like that, something more magical and becoming of a dragon? This is pathetic, and Rhaegal goes out like a bitch. It's actually sad because this was Jon's dragon, and now we will never get to see him live his best Targaryen life. Why does Cersei not take Drogon out in this moment? After seeing what the scorpions are capable of, what could Drogon possibly do if she yelled fire and bombarded him with arrows? Granted, he's the largest dragon, but still, 3 to 4 arrows seem to do the trick. She had a whole lineup of scorpions ready to fire and chooses to finally show restraint? But not even, because she then murders Missandei right in front of Daenerys, essentially daring her to return with Drogon, where he will have a fair chance, I guess? Why is she playing fair now? Now back to Daenerys. I can't even be upset at the fact that she doesn't go ballistic in this moment, because she, like us, is probably fuming at the fact that these scorpions are somehow able to harm her magical fire-breathing lizards. So she decides to play it cool in this moment and bring the pain tomorrow. Don't worry, we are almost there. She burns Varys alive. Varys decides to stop acting like himself not too long after season 8 begins. He has an open conversation with Jon about treason. He is already on Daenerys' shit list for past offenses, and in season 8 he gets the uncontrollable urge to put Jon on the Iron Throne. This is obviously linked to the discovery that Jon is actually the son of Dany's brother, Rhaegar, which presents a major dilemma for Daenerys because, I mean, yeah, they already are kind of and she doesn't seem interested in stopping. She also is no longer the only Targaryen left, which proposes a real threat to her whole claim to the Iron Throne. Jon, however, is completely devastated by the news and is clearly turned off by the fact that Dany is his aunt. Dany still wants to be in a relationship with Jon, but she wants him somehow to conceal the fact that he's a Targaryen from everyone. This request didn't really seem that crazy to me. It's just unfortunate that Jon had to go run his big mouth and tell Sansa and Arya, which subsequently leads to Sansa telling Tyrion, who then tells Varys. Varys is prompted to act on said information because he is messy and can't stand the fact that Daenerys is prettier than him. Okay, no, but he actually insists she is showing signs of madness, which I guess was true, but then again, understandably so. He was acting like Jon was so much more stable than Daenerys, and I don't know if that's really true. Both are unpredictable to an extent, as they both are very unique characters. Had anyone went through what Daenerys went through within a 48-hour time period, they'd also be very upset and look a bit tired. Varys seemingly anticipated Daenerys' incoming rampage and decides to try and usurp her. He does this by sending ravens, trying to get Jon and Tyrion in on it with him, and even trying to poison Daenerys. After having the most public and non-covert discussion about treason ever, Varys is spotted by Tyrion, who decides to rat him out to Daenerys, consequently leading to him being burned alive. I hate so many things about this. I hate that Dany has to be the one to kill Varys, because though it is hinted at in earlier seasons, it's just not what Varys deserved in my opinion. His character started to act like a fucking idiot in the end and unfortunately died like one as well. Daenerys has clearly lost it by this point. She essentially makes Grey Worm her new bestie and decides to use fear to make everyone bend to her will. In the scene where Tyrion rats Varys out, she threatens Tyrion's life for like the second time, saying that the next time he feels her will be his last blah blah blah. At this point, I have to question what Daenerys actually gains from keeping Tyrion around. Sure, he took control when she left the Marine, but she had to come back and save the city because he damn near lost it. Sure, he facilitated meeting with Jon, but look how that played out for both of them. And yes, he knows Cersei very well, but this knowledge doesn't seem to serve Daenerys because he doesn't utilize it properly. He tries to play both sides. He literally frees Jaime knowing that it will get him killed, and yet it somehow does not get him killed. Instead, it gets him locked up. So, Varys plots to put another Targaryen on the Iron Throne and you burn him alive, yet Tyrion publicly disrespects you and challenges your authority and you imprison him? Weird flex, but okay. You're telling me there's no place for Varys in scenes like this? I guess what I'm getting at here is perhaps she should have burned both of these bastards together. That would literally eliminate her major oppositions in the future and probably even prevent her death. Let's move on, shall we? Daenerys burns King's Landing. I've been waiting what seems like forever to rant about this dark moment in history. Even the poor unfortunate souls of King's Landing deserve just a bit better than this. Daenerys completely destroys King's Landing in Dragonfire just as her father once aspired to do. Why the f does she do this, you might ask? It's not like any of these people in King's Landing have actually done anything to her. It's not like these are her future subjects. No. To Daenerys, the people of King's Landing were nothing more than target practice for her in Drogon. She purposely targets and stalks mothers, children, and anyone else that she can happen to focus on. How the f did we get here? Tyrion asks Dany to stop the attack on King's Landing if the bells are rung, as they indicate surrender. Daenerys never officially confirmed that this is her game plan, but I mean, why the f would she not stop? It's like the writers tried to force you to believe that her issue is with the people of King's Landing now too, but when the f did that become the case? Now granted, I can get her overall frustration towards the people of King's Landing, feeling as though she sacrificed a lot for them. But how in the f does this make your sacrifice worth it? Even Daenerys isn't this short-sighted and slave to her emotions. We're talking mass shooter vibes, just indiscriminately murdering anyone she is able to. And the greatest question of all here is why the fuck did she not go straight for Cersei, the woman who personally murdered her best friend, betrayed her when it mattered most, and targeted one of her 2 remaining dragons? She knows exactly where to go to attack Cersei, yet doesn't do it, which is weird and confusing. Instead, she destroys all the city's defenses and proceeds to land Drogon on a random building, awaiting the city's surrender. Once given the imminent surrender, she takes a few deep breaths, gives us the viewer a look that clearly indicates some stupid shit is about to go down, and then takes flight. From here, she proceeds to torch any and everyone she can lay eyes on in King's Landing. As I mentioned earlier, this is not excluding women and children. I remember first seeing this and repeatedly saying, Dany, no. Dany, why? While she begins to incinerate every living soul in King's Landing, her useless army proceeds to try and make themselves relevant by attacking the defenseless Lannister army. This is after the Lannister army has surrendered, mind you, and even dropped their weapons. I guess Daenerys and Grey Worm can communicate telepathically and decided to start senselessly murdering people when the bells were rung. The Unsullied and Northmen begin to murder and mutilate this group of terrified men, along with raping and killing women just because. I don't know if this is supposed to be the show's take on chaos and how war brings out the worst in humanity, but geez, it is not easy on the eyes. After a certain point of seeing people be burned alive, and mutilated, it's just like, what am I even watching this for? It starts to resemble All Quiet on the Western Front. From the minute Daenerys starts her rampage, you know she must die, and this will not end well for her. So all the excitement and intrigue surrounding her storyline is traded off for this brief moment of ridiculous storytelling. We don't even get to see her or get insight into her thoughts while she's doing all this. Why the fuck would we not want to see what's going on in her head during this moment? Because we are certainly confused and in disbelief that the person on this city burning dragon is the Daenerys we know and love. Instead, we get what honestly looks to be Drogon acting on his own merit. This scene could honestly be swapped out. Instead of Dany being on Drogon while he does all of this, why not just have her somewhere else? Why not let Drogon do this by himself and make Dany deal with the consequences of his actions? It's not like it's something we haven't seen before. And again, for this particular scene, it would still work for what the writers were trying to accomplish. House of the Dragon subverts people's expectations in a compelling way, like showing us that Aemon ultimately did not intend to murder Lucerys, and the Dance of the Dragons culminated from a series of unfortunate events and people's perceptions of those events. Daenerys burning King's Landing simply because she's having a bad day is not nearly as intriguing as Drogon burning the city without her permission. Well, what does all this violence and chaos lead to? Daenerys being murdered by Jon, who is somehow not overwhelmingly convinced that she is a deranged mass murderer by this point, despite all the people of King's Landing being hunted down and executed like animals. Jon somehow still sees good in Daenerys even after she destroys an entire city and essentially brags about it afterwards. Tyrion and Arya have to convince him that she is no longer fit to rule, especially following previous events. Jon Snow is such a fucking idiot. I'll have to dive deeper into this a bit later. But anyways, he reluctantly kills Dany, and then Drogon almost kills Jon, but doesn't. Instead, he just grabs Dany's corpse and takes flight to Lord knows where. Talk about underwhelming and forgettable. I bet a lot of you forgot that is the way Daenerys died because it is literally just that forgettable. For such an important character to be poked to death, again, is beyond disappointing for a show that has always been known for its great and tragic deaths. Who wrote the deaths for seasons 7 and 8? Don't worry, I just want to talk. Because we seem to have a problem with major characters being killed off like irrelevant bitches. Literally, Ser Jorah or even Tyrion killing Dany makes a bit more sense than Jon, and would still be quite entertaining. This whole Jon and Dany being intertwined in the Force thing is really starting to get on my nerves. So is this like Jon fulfilling his prophecy of Azor Ahai in some sort of way? Since the Night King has shitted on him so many times, he must now get one up on Daenerys? Instead of saving everyone from the actual existential threat, he'll be the one to save everyone from this crazy psycho bitch that he's been screwing and happens to also be his aunt. Confusion. But you know what? Again, more on Jon at a later date. In conclusion, I could go on for a very long time about the many ways I am disappointed in the direction that this show took Daenerys' storyline. She definitely deserves better than this. She's a fucking icon and a staple in pop culture. The writers of this show should never be allowed to handle any major franchise ever again because it is clear that they crack under pressure. That or they legitimately believe that this is good storytelling, which is even more off-putting. I'll see you guys again in the next video.